I am skeptical about Dragon Age Veilguard, and it's safe to say after the initial reveal, it left a lot to be desired. Many fans, including myself, weren't exactly losing their minds at what was being shown. Since that initial reveal, we've had a great deal of information shown to us by Bioware that has started to change at least my outlook on the game a little bit. So I wanted to take a look at the details we have, discuss why the game looks way better than I thought, but I also want to come at this with a healthy dose of skepticism. After the last two Bioware games, I think it's fair to say they haven't exactly filled us with confidence. I'm not here to dump all over the game, but I do have some key questions that I want to answer and discuss in today's video. The first two questions I have are: how does the world of Veilguard look and feel, and how does the world play? I asked this question because we've been getting mixed messages from the start. The initial reveal trailer felt like a push towards modern audiences, bright and vibrant colours, and to put it in the simplest of terms, something felt off. It would be like making a comedic upbeat trailer for the new Mass Effect game. Some fans, including myself, weren't exactly sold on the idea and the direction that the game was going in. It wasn't until I actually saw gameplay that I started to come around to the idea of what this game actually looks like. There seems to be this blend of high fantasy and dark fantasy, and there's this rich story that they might be telling, but if it's coloured with a bright and vibrant aesthetic, it doesn't mesh well and it doesn't feel right. Thankfully, we can get a little bit of an idea from the most recent IGN preview, where it was stated, while the Veilguard's tone certainly leans more high fantasy in places like the Crossroads, don't worry, those who miss the gore and dark fantasy of Origins will find that too in places where the blight has spread. Now, you can't take 100% the word of IGN, I know, but having some hands-on impressions is a good foundation to talk more about the game. What it seems like Bioware are attempting is to blend that high fantasy and dark fantasy thanks to that corruption and the different areas that we're going to go and visit within the game. The world, tone and visual aesthetic is the most front-facing thing that we will see whenever we see any trailers or gameplay, and it is also hard to grasp what they are going for in terms of story and dialogue because we can't play the game for ourselves right now. And as of what we are seeing at this present moment, it's hard to answer that first question of how the game will feel and how it will look because we're getting two different messages. However, we can certainly get a grasp of how we will be interacting with the world of Dragon Age thanks to the hands-on previews. Veilguard seems to be taking more of a semi-linear approach to its world. Now, I'm using those words as kind of buzzwords here, but what I mean by that is that you're going to be going to these regions to explore, and it's not too dissimilar to what we've seen Bioware do before. Similar to the Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect, there's these areas that you can go and visit, and there's lots of stuff to do in them, and a little bit expanded. And it's not this big seamless open world that most of the big RPGs are going for currently. Another quote from the article reads, "The opening hours are essentially the tutorial zone. They're a little railroady, save for a couple of key decisions you have to make. But once you are past that and are more established within Act 1, you're much more free to tackle quests as you please as you unlock more and more regions." I like this approach that Bioware goes for because it's quite apparent that they do this in a lot of their other games. Think Knights of the Old Republic, Mass Effect, I think they did this in Inquisition a little bit as well. Smaller regions packed with things to do rather than these big open worlds that can at times feel empty and just filled with filler content. From my perspective, I think it allows developers to curate the areas that you go and visit as a player, so it's not more fill it with repeated or randomly generated content that can feel boring and lackluster, one of my main gripes with Starfield. And something to back this up is another statement that I pulled from the preview, which is Veilguard boiled this down quite a lot. You are still free to explore, but the scope isn't nearly as dizzying, and quests point back to the main story, a region or a faction, or a companion. I don't mind this, I just hope that what we will be doing is meaningful and have an impact, and it seems like that's the direction that they are going for. And this is a very much a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of situation. You have too many quests, it's bloated, where you have too few and the game is lacking content or is thin. It's going to be a delicate balance that I pray Bioware gets right. Making your choices matter is such a big thing advertised by many RPG developers. The ones that get it right are loved by many, and those choices having an effect on the world around you is also good when it's done effectively. This is my biggest worry with Veilguard. They have to get this right. And what you can get right is clicking on that subscribe button if you like this content and you want to see more. The next big question I have for Bioware is, how does combat and progression feel at a high level? It's certainly a departure from previous games when looking at Veilguard's new combat system, and quite frankly, that first gameplay portion that we got was really basic. But from what I gathered, it seemed like it was a very early, more tutorial section of the game, and there isn't many tutorials that I remember from most games, if I'm being honest, so it was kind of to be expected. Thankfully, we have had a bunch more gameplay that does showcase what the game looks like at the end game level. It plays off this primer and detonation system that will be how you factor in your companions and your abilities and how they all kind of work in tandem. Maybe it's just me, but it seems like the people showcasing the game, the developers in this case, aren't doing a good job of showcasing what this looks like. The IGN gameplay that is littered throughout this video is a much better representation of the final game. We are still like over a month out from the game launching, and maybe they'll do some more hands-on previews and there'll be some better gameplay out there that we can see. It definitely feels like they could bring in someone that is very skilled with the combat system and make a really cool combat trailer that really sells what they are going for, because at the moment it doesn't really do that. The thing is, there are many things here that I really like. A deep skill tree with many passives and greater passives and going in different directions to take your build. There's the 3 specializations that you can go down per class. Runes that have active and passive effects. Traits that are button combos that you can lang to set off different abilities. Big showcase ultimates, and then combining it with the skills of yourself and your companions with the primer and detonation system. The build crafter in me gets excited to see how all of these will work in tandem for the final product, and catering my playstyle and pairing it with my companions is one of the reasons that I think I like Bioware RPGs so much, especially the Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect. Then you have the gear side of things, including your enchantments and the properties that you have on your gear that you can get. And I do like the fact that you can level up and the gear will stay on level with you. You're not just going to get an old, irrelevant gear. And if you get something better, you can then like upgrade your lower end gear, which I think is pretty cool. And you have an ability tree for your companions as well as their gear as well. And it seems like there's going to be a lot that we can work with. However, I'm not blind to the complaints that I've seen online, and I kind of have a similar viewpoint that with the new combat system, maybe it will reduce some of the complexity that we had in previous games, and it doesn't feel like Dragon Age is one of the biggest complaints I've seen, and I do have to agree a little bit. It seems like it loses a little bit of that essence, being able to stop time or slow down time and then prep things the way you want to do with your 2 companions. I definitely feel like they could have kept the third person perspective and still had that tactical view. You may not have as much control over your companions, but still having that view would be nice and keep that kind of essence of Dragon Age while trying to evolve the formula, kind of meshing of the old and the new. In the end, I am very skeptical about this combat system because on the surface it looks quite floaty and more like a hack and slash than this deep combo primer system than we are actually seeing. It's hard to get a grasp on how gameplay feels until it's in your hand. It could feel quite weighty, it could feel better than it actually looks, but similar to the story and the tone and the world, this could be a massive risk for Bioware, and it could alienate some long-time Dragon Age fans and give a real sour taste towards it if it doesn't land. So they need to get this combat system right. It needs to feel good, but at this present moment, it just doesn't look that way. The final question I'm asking is, do you feel confident about Dragon Age Veilguard? This feels like a huge opportunity for the studio to regain some favor with its fans, but more importantly, a wider audience. And it doesn't seem to be going that way, at least at the moment. I think it's 100% fair to be tempered in the expectations of this game. Does it have many things that I like in RPGs? Yes, it most certainly does. Do I have the confidence that it will be good? I'm not so sure yet. Developers are well in their rights to take risks with games and try and evolve them to try and offer new experiences. But the problem with Bioware is they've not built up that level of trust that they had going into Inquisition. We are 10 years later and 2 flops down the line. For example, From Software has built up a level of trust with its players that every release that is coming out, the players know that it's going to be some form of what they've seen before, and that's what they enjoy. You can't put out products at the level of Anthem and Mass Effect Andromeda and then expect people to trust you when you're bringing out the next title, regardless of if it's a massive franchise or not. That trust simply isn't there. It's important to remember that the developers aren't the only ones taking the risk. We, the consumers, are when we go to put money down on these games, especially with the prices of AAA games at the moment. Putting money down on a product that you don't have 100% faith in isn't very good, and with the track record of the last 2 games, that faith in the developers is very, very thin. It breeds and provokes a lot of skepticism, which is why this video is being made in the first place, and why a lot of people have a lot of skepticism about many games. This isn't just a Dragon Age problem, this is across the AAA games industry in general. We can play the what if scenario of if this game is going to be good, or what would this have been like if it had been a couple of years ago and we hadn't had the debacle with Anthem and with Mass Effect Andromeda. I'm making a big point about those games because they really shattered what people thought about Bioware, and it means that I am also very skeptical about the next Mass Effect game, regardless if I'm a massive Mass Effect fan. I'm still going to be looking at going, okay, are they going to stick to the formula of what we've seen before? Are they shaking things up like they've done with Veilguard? This game needs to land some form of critical success, and fans need to like this. Otherwise, it's going to be a very shaky couple of years before Bioware's next title. I really want them to do well with this, and I want them to succeed because I'm a long-time fan of Bioware, but the studio isn't the same that it was back in 2009, 2008, when they were at their high point releasing Dragon Age and Mass Effect. I'm very hopeful more than anything for Dragon Age Veilguard. Optimistic, if you will. Sadly, with the way that conversations that are going around the game at the moment, if this game isn't a 10 out of 10 at launch, then it will be slammed for being another AAA flop. But that's a wider problem that isn't necessarily relevant to the game itself. I really want Veilguard to do well, but I'm still 100% skeptical of how this will turn out. But what do you think? Optimistic? Low expectations? Let me know down in the comment section. And as always, if you enjoyed this video and it's been insightful, leave a like on it, subscribe if you're new. This has been Jimbo, and I'll see you guys next time.